Hello, I'm Dr. Pedram Shojai. Welcome to the exclusive opening of Interconnected, a series about the missing microbes in our gut and what they have to do with our health. You may know me from the documentaries Vitality, Origins, and Prosperity, or from my book, The Urban Monk. But what you're about to see here is far bigger than any of those. I'm a devoted family man, and it's a heavy lift to be away from them for several months. It has to be worth the sacrifice. The information you're about to receive is simply revolutionary. It changes everything, and I'm on a mission to share it with everyone. Interconnected is a groundbreaking 9-part series about health and hope. Whether you're looking to maintain it, regain it, or help others with theirs, it's going to change your life. There's just too much illness and disease in our world, and our current medical model is just not cutting it. In fact, it's failing miserably with chronic disease. This groundbreaking new series centers around your gut microbiome, the complex colonies of microbial life within us. Think of it as a new organ just discovered in your body, one that interconnects with all other organs. It regulates immunity, our overall health, and mental state. And the best part is, we're now learning to understand and work with it. I spent several months talking with top research scientists, doctors, and health professionals, and brought them together for this series. In my travels, I also met people with serious health problems, chronic illnesses, and disease that have become all too familiar in our lives.
I was 14 years old, and I was actually in the hospital dying of heart failure, and it was because of an eating disorder.
I had a very bad fortune that in my early 20s, I developed early onset rheumatoid arthritis. In my late 30s, it sort of became cumulatively worse and worse and worse, and I was starting to deteriorate.
Obviously, in gaining 50 plus pounds in a matter of months, something was not right in my body.
We learned that I had 4 different heavy metals that were high. Lead was several times over the upper limit. Mercury was off the charts.
Constant state of fight or flight. My adrenals were shot. I started having insomnia. I couldn't sleep through the night for 18 months.
I was diagnosed with thyroid disease after almost 10 years of really strange symptoms.
And I had IBS, I had hives, just randomly would get rashes.
I had a suicide attempt that left me in a coma with kidney failure on dialysis.
I actually have 4 autoimmune diseases.
I was initially diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and then the diagnosis changed to Crohn's.
When I left the hospital, I was never the same.
I started seeing doctor after doctor. Initially, they diagnosed me with the parasite, but treating that didn't get anything better.
Because I had never, ever experienced anxiety before, and suddenly the smallest things would just trigger me.
I was in a series of head traumas, and it led to chronic migraine and chronic neck pain. And that continued and persisted for 15 years.
These people are like you and me. You'll want to hear their full stories, especially in the face of today's alarming rise in chronic disease. Autoimmunity, obesity, diabetes, IBS, autism, Parkinson's, fatigue, the list goes on. For them, hope arrived with fixing the microbiome. It's our very own internal ecosystem of beneficial bacteria, fungi, and viruses all working together to fight disease and keep us healthy. My good friend Dr. Tom O'Brien calls it the game changer. Because health is everything, watching this series may be the most important exercise of your life. We'll start now with getting you up to speed on the hottest new topic in medicine today, the gut microbiome.
The microbiome refers to all the organisms that live in and on our bodies. So not just bacteria, which is what most people think of, but also viruses, fungal organisms, little one-celled protozoa. So really all the microscopic critters that inhabit our body, more than 100 trillion, and more than 1 billion in just one drop of fluid in the colon alone. So lots of organisms.
The microbiome is the game changer. It's just the game changer. And you're going to have many wonderful speakers on this summit who are going to talk about the microbiome. I thought that one critically important concept that I could give you that will probably be unique. How has your gut been nurtured in the last 30 years, 40 years? What's the environment of the gut like? It's not the same as your spouse's or your daughter's or your son's or your parents'. Everyone's gut is unique because of what we've put down there. Every forkful of what you put down there has an effect on the microbiome.
There are hundreds and trillions of microbes that are within our gut microbiome. And that broad array includes some friendly bacteria, which helps us function well. We commonly talk about lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, but there are other bacteria that are unfriendly, or it can be quite harmful if they get out of control.
For those who are unfamiliar with the term microbiome, can you kind of say what that is and what role it plays in health and disease?
For most of medical history, other than Eli Metcalfe in the turn of the century in the 1900s, who coined the word dysbiosis, which is the imbalance in our gut microbiome and how that may be related to disease, we basically ignored the gut flora and the gut microbiome, which is this host of bacteria in there. There's 1,000 different species. There's 10 times as many bacterial cells as your own cells. There's 100 times as much bacterial DNA than your own DNA. Literally, you're only about 1% human. And what we find is that those bugs aren't just waste. They're dynamically interacting with your biology every minute. They're controlling levels of inflammation. They're controlling the permeability of your gut or leaky gut. They're controlling your brain chemistry. They're controlling your hormones. They're controlling your metabolism. They're controlling your nutrient levels. They're controlling what you absorb and don't absorb. These are the most important things in our life that are controlling our health, and we've completely ignored them. We don't know how to diagnose it, we don't know how to treat this, and we don't know how to help people fix their microbiome in their gut.
For the past 12 years now, my lab has been focused on trying to understand the structure and function of all the microorganisms that live with us in our GI tracts. And we know from lots and lots of studies that these microbes that share our space with us from the day we're born until the day we die are critically important in health and disease. And the big challenge that my lab and lots of labs around the world are working on is really figuring out how they contribute. And I think the ultimate goal is to be able to understand what a healthy microbiome is and hopefully be able to leverage that to improve overall health and minimize disease.
We can see that as right before an autoimmune disease, we can show collapse of the microbiome. There's a sudden drop and then you have an autoimmune disease. Sudden drop and then you have a stroke. So we've seen that general concept, but this starts to answer why is it that the diversity of the microbiome translates into health?
I think we will find that the microbiome is important in just about all the chronic diseases that have risen dramatically since World War II. And that's my area of biggest interest. We think that diseases should be relatively constant in a population, but sometimes diseases go up dramatically. For example, lung cancer was pretty rare until people began to smoke, and then it went up a lot. And now when people are smoking less, it's going down. So diseases change. But now we have this whole group of diseases that has risen dramatically since World War II, since the widespread use of antibiotics, that involves many systems. Celiac disease and inflammatory bowel disease, the bowel, diabetes, obesity, autism. So they could either everyone have a completely separate cause and it's all one big coincidence, or it could be that there's something underlying them all that's causing the disease. And that's my theory, and that is the changed microbiome is underlying it.
But if in one generation we teach our children how to interact with the soil, take care of it, interact with the microbiome, let it take care of us, we're going to slash our disease processes, we're going to slash our disability function, we're going to increase our productivity, we're going to start to increase our creativity.
There is no hype on the gut microbiome. This is definitely not a fad. This is just a breakthrough in our understanding about the human body. In the 80s and 90s, it was a decade of the brain, and then it was a decade of the genes for research. Now it's the decade of the gut microbiome. And part of this is happening because there's thousands and thousands of research papers being published on this. There isn't a field in medicine that isn't impacted by the gut microbiome. Gut microbiome research has been shown in nephrology journals and cardiology journals and endocrinology journals, and you name it, it's out there. So there is just huge advances in research, and they're finding how the gut microbiome impacts all disease. And this may be where the evidence really goes back to, if you really are doing an evidence-based model, you really have to consider gut diversity, diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and various variables that impact our bacteria in our gut.
I find it ironic that we don't, like medicine doesn't take it into account how important the bugs that live symbiotically with us, the impact that they have on our lives, right? Because we are constantly surrounded by them, they're inside of us, they're on the outside of us. There isn't anything that's closer to us than these bugs. They are part of us, right? So it's finally, thankfully, it is becoming known, but I think it should have been discovered a long time ago.
Before we get into detox solutions, where can a healthy microbiome fit into that as kind of a shield or a force field against some of these toxins?
I think it's very important when you're looking at a person's health, you look at all factors. And I know lately people have become very excited about the microbiome. Well, for good reason, because having the wrong kind of bacteria in your gut definitely increases your risk of disease. But you can't look at the microbiome independent of what you're eating, because the food you eat will determine what kind of microbiome you have. The toxins you're being exposed to will determine the kind of microbiome you're having. The drugs you take a bunch of broad spectrum antibiotics, you're going to produce a really unhealthy microbiome in your body. So you have to look at the whole person. You look at everything that's going on, the microbiome, the food, the water, the air, the health and beauty aids. Look at everything.
And what the field of microbiome research has really forced us to do relatively recently is acknowledge that not only are we a system of multiple organs and tissues that work together, but living in us and on us is this incredibly complex ecosystem of microbes that play a tremendously important role in health and disease by interacting with each other and by interacting with us as a host. And I think we know that the microbiome contributes in so many different ways. I don't think we can any longer ignore the fact that when we think about approaching disease, when we think about a diagnosis, when we think about a treatment, we have to always consider the impacts and the implications of the microbiome.
When we talk about the microbiome, most people always think about the microbes, but there's also now interest and technology to assess another category of microorganisms, the viruses. And a large number of these viruses are phages, meaning they have the ability to kill and prey on the other microbes. So the relative population distribution in the gut of microbes may be in part related to what viruses are there. That microbes also kill each other with microcidal chemicals, or like their own antibiotics. There's lots of antibiotics that they produce to sort of fight each other. But with the viruses, it's interesting because that is coming up as a potential pathophysiological mechanism for anything for like autoimmune diseases, inflammatory bowel disease, and again Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, the neurodegenerative diseases. And one could speculate, and this is pure speculation, that a microbiome of high diversity and abundance of microorganisms is less prone to be targeted by these phages, by these viruses.
So my first journey into health was kind of the biggest journey I had. It started when I was 7 years old. I was in a series of head traumas, and it led to chronic migraine and chronic neck pain. And that continued and persisted for 15 years. And when I was in my teens, around 15, 16, I had been to a slew of doctors, neurologists, name it, and basically I was told that I was always going to live with this chronic pain. So I usually took a lot of my Excedrin migraines, my Advil, whatever it may be, at school, at home, whatever it was to beat this migraine pain, I was washing it down with Pepsi. Like, goodness forbid I ever take my medications with water. That was just like a no-go. So, in my late teens, early 20s, I ended up developing these small ulcers, and ultimately was because of this chronic pain. And I was dealing with bloating, gas. I mean, my gut was completely torn up. But the thing of it is that my migraines were the biggest concern in my life. I mean, they kept me from going to school. They kept me from hanging out with friends. And so between the two, if I had to pick between the neck pain and the gut issue, I always chose the pain. And so I made an appointment and I started undergoing all of the different therapies. So I got chiropractic care, a very specific type of chiropractic care for my neck, for my migraines. I got acupuncture, I saw a nutritionist, and it changed everything. Like I learned that, we had this incredible, whole sphere of environment, this microbiome inside of our gut, and that if we weren't taking care of it right, it could lead to all kinds of inflammation, which is probably what I was experiencing, and leading to a lot of inflammation everywhere else.
Many people don't realize this, but 90% of our health is determined by social, behavioral, and environmental factors. Only 10% of your health is determined by medical interventions. And the truth is those 10% are probably coming later in life when it's a bit too late, or let's say maybe you're not older, but you're later in a disease process where it's a little bit too late. We're not preventing, we're not always curing, we're kind of managing disease once it's gotten out of control. And all of the technology in medicine, the electronic medical records on which doctors now depend to do their day-to-day job, right? We all have digital tools, that's what we use in medicine. Most of them, if not almost none of them, capture these social determinants of health. So 90% of you, what you're eating, your relationships, your supplements, your exercise, the genomics, the microbiome, your health history, your family history, your environmental exposures, none of these are captured in the electronic records that a doctor is looking at. So as a result, a doctor is looking at this teeny tiny sliver of you. What I love about functional health is that it looks at all of these aspects of you, what you're eating, your entire personal history from when you were born until now, some of the amazing diagnostic data we have now, like the microbiome and genomics. And we take all of that in functional health, and then we use that whole picture of you to help guide you to better health.
The old medicine was when you go to a doctor, you're diagnosed with MS or you're diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, here's the drugs that'll help you along. None of these treatments ever stop the progression of the thing. They can slow it down a little bit, but it's a life jacket. You're still in the pond of the disease. None of them stop it. The new medicine is, let's go to the prodromal period. Let's identify now if you have these antibodies killing off your brain. I had 3 antibodies killing off my brain. I did this test in 1997 when it was research only. This is what got me into this whole field of talking about this, because I was 44 doing triathlons regularly, scoring in the top 10% of the 30 to 35-year-olds at 44. So I'm just walking tall, I'm a stud, I'm healthy. And I did this blood test, and I had antibodies to myelin basic protein elevated, that's MS, the mechanism of MS. Antibodies elevated to cerebellum, that's what shrinks your brain, and old people can't walk up and down the stairs very well. And antibodies elevated to gangliosides, that causes shrinking of the entire brain. You get non-Alzheimer's dementia. I called the lab and I said, what is this? This is a mistake, I'm healthy. And they said, no, it's no mistake. I said, do it again. They said, we did, we know it's you, we did it again. And that's when I got religion about this. Wow. And that's when I learned about this prodromal period. So the new medicine is identifying if you are in the prodromal period, where is your genetic vulnerability, where is it showing, and then what do you do about it?
Yeah, we're interested in the gut-brain connection, so how events in the gut, specifically microbial events, affect everything from mood and emotion to neurodegeneration. And so trying to understand whether or not there are specific bacteria that either promote or protect against diseases such as autism or Parkinson's. Yeah, we have a rich nervous system, not just in our brain, but in our intestines as well as in the periphery. And so the enteric nervous system actually has been studied for many decades. And so these two nervous systems talk to each other. So the nerves in the gut communicate with the brain through the vagus nerve directly in terms of neuronal connections, but also through soluble molecules that are secreted in the gut that may activate the enteric nervous system as well as the central nervous system. And we and other others are trying to understand what is the basis of that communication. How do microbes or molecules mediate this interaction between the gut and the brain?
What we've discovered is this very important connection as to how the gut microbiome regulates the activity level of our immune system. And so I think that's huge, because inflammation as a general term just means that someone's immune system is hyperactive. That's a good thing if there's an active infection, but if there's no active infection, that means the immune system is going to attack your own body. And so when we look at chronic diseases such as heart disease that is caused by atherosclerosis, or when we look at Alzheimer's or many other inflammatory diseases, they're all caused by this hyperactive immune system. Rheumatoid arthritis would be probably the most well-known disease that's caused by simply a hyperactive immune system. And so now we're starting to learn how the gut microbiome regulates the immune system and can calm it down and prevent this damage that is completely unnecessary because we're not continuously infected.
The microbiome talks to the immune system. There's cross-communication from the immune system that's inside the lining of the gut to the microbiome that's on the outside of the gut. They talk back and forth. There's this crosstalk. And they're always getting so the immune system is asking the sentries that are out there in the tube, what's going on out there? And the microbiome is sending messages of warning or messages of everything's good right now. That crosstalk is going on all the time, back and forth. What happens is that we develop a microbiome over time that may be so inflammatory, it's tearing the lining by itself. The microbiome, when you have high concentrations of some of the bacteria that aren't supposed to be there in those high concentrations, they trigger, the immune system says, whoa, that's way too many messengers coming through. We need to get rid of some of those messengers. We're getting mixed messages here. The immune system will then go after some of that microbiome. So you get this inflammation going on constantly, 24/7, until the microbiome changes.
So you have all these different words that are diagnoses. People end up, getting these kind of medical, labels. Yet you're talking about a similar solution to the gut.
Right. So the diseases, think of it as like leaves on a tree. We want to go to the root. And so our entire naming system in medicine is based on symptoms and geography. What are the symptoms and where is it? Do you have stomach pain? Do you have head pain? What is it? And then we categorize people according to these symptoms and geography, and not according to the causes or the mechanisms. So you can have one cause that can cause dozens of diseases. You can have one disease that's caused by dozens of causes. So just because you know the name of the disease doesn't mean you know what's wrong with you, right? If you say you have depression, it's a common name we give to people who are sad and hopeless and helpless and have no interest in sex and can't sleep and have no appetite and feel suicidal. But we say you have depression. Depression isn't the cause of the symptoms, it's the name of the symptoms. The causes could be many. It could be that you've taken antibiotics and altered your gut flora and you have dysbiosis that's leading to inflammation in the brain. It could be you've got a low thyroid or you're eating gluten that's triggering neuroinflammation. It could be that you have taken acid blockers for years and don't absorb B12 because of it and have B12 deficiency, or you have vitamin D deficiency, or maybe it's because you eat a lot of sushi and have mercury poisoning, or maybe because you hate fish and have omega-3 deficiency, or eat a lot of sugar and have prediabetes in your brain, all of which cause depression. Our current model of thinking in diagnosis will not help you navigate to the causes. So that's what functional medicine does. It's a new roadmap, a new GPS system for thinking about disease. And by addressing all those variables, we can often treat the same conditions by using the same approach. Doesn't mean every case of Alzheimer's or autism is caused by the gut or obesity or diabetes. But by looking at everybody as an individual, you can identify which patients that might be the case, and then you can treat them.
My journey into wellness, it's been a long road. And it started, we'll use the word demise, started in high school when I developed an eating disorder. And then I went on to university, and I'm a recovering type A, so I was overachieving. And I ended up in my third year of university in a very deep depression, and I was riddled with anxiety. Still had the eating disorder that was going on as well. The problem was I didn't really understand what I was going through because I'd never experienced depression before. Nobody in my family had spoken about it, so it was really hard for me to understand what was going on. And the really interesting thing about all of this is a year prior to the eating disorder starting in high school, I did a year of antibiotics for acne. And nobody made the connection between the relationship between the gut and the brain until 20 years later.
There are over 100 trillion microbes that live within our gastrointestinal tract. They outnumber our human cells 10 to 1, in the DNA pool of human cells 100 to 1. And they cover our skin, they're in our gut, and they play a very large role in health in general. There's a lot of literature explaining and going into how different bacterial strains can affect certain health issues. In an animal model, there was one study that showed that when the infant monkeys were separated from their mothers at birth, that they lost diversity of their microbiome, and certain key species of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium went down, and other species of bacteria such as Prevotella went up. And correlating that with other literature, these are the same patterns that we see in people with mood disorders and psychiatric conditions. And these bacteria digest our foods. They produce short-chain fatty acids that can almost act as chemotherapeutic agents. That's kind of how I think of the microbiome. We perceive a very small fraction of the power of the microbiome in our regular day-to-day going-ons. And there's so much information that happens in the background, communication between the gut and the brain, and gastrointestinal motility, and other functions, hormonal impacts that is happening in the background that we don't know. And these are the things that can contribute to our memory, to our moods, to a variety of other conditions. And that's all happening in the background.
What have you seen in autoimmunity? What have you seen in chronic illnesses that have had dramatic turnarounds with treatment of the gut?
The practice that I had was dealing mostly with complex chronic conditions. So I used to see patients where they'd already been through the typical medical doctor treatment, they've been through the diagnostic dilemma, they've been through even seeing integrative and alternative practitioners, and when they still couldn't get that help that they were really needed and looked for, I ended up seeing them. And 10 times out of 10, the first place I started was with the gut and the microbiome, because that was the one critical component that was really underlying majority of diseases. So when you could address the microbiome and gut health, in so many cases you could not just halt or make someone feel better or reverse their symptoms, you could reverse these chronic diseases. Autoimmune diseases, clearly, those are very, I wouldn't say easy to treat, but when you can address the underlying cause, the root cause of the gut, they often reversed. So the one thing I've learned is that we're not really human. We are a human microbial ecosystem, and we live in an earth microbial ecosystem. We are a small player. It's a paradigm shift. We used to think that we're individuals and humans and we're so special, but we are actually part of a much bigger system. And what I've learned is that our microbiome is fundamental to everything that we are and everything we do. Our entire environment gets filtered through this microbiome, these microorganisms, and transformed by these microorganisms before they affect our human body. Our diet, definitely, but the air that we breathe, everything, even our thoughts get transformed and filtered by our microbiome.
And one of the emerging themes from microbiome research from the community is that our own genome isn't sufficient to induce or to promote all the different functions or activities of the human body, that we rely on inputs or signals from the microbiome. And it's really fascinating to see how bacteria in our gut provide signals or cues to our development and function, just as our own genome does. And many people have suggested, and I do agree, that we have two genomes, our own and a microbial genome.
So all of these functions that we used to think were just human, our microbes do them. Everything from metabolizing hormones and stress hormones and changing the foods that we eat. They control our biological rhythms and our sleep cycle, our circadian function. They actually are the first ones to metabolize all drugs that we take in. So a drug can be effective or not depending on our unique microbiome, and we've clearly seen that in cancer therapy and diabetes therapy. In fact, you can transfer the effect of a drug by transferring just the microbiome and not the drug. So it's really that fundamental interface of our environment and ourselves. And that's what our microbiome is. And it's, when we look at the function of the microbiome and then we look at what it does, the first thing I ask myself is, are we sure that's not a human function? Because they do so many things that our human body does, plus so many more. They're our biggest detox organ. They're our biggest nutrient generator. They do all of those things for us, and we give them a home. And we provide things for them. We eat to feed them. And so it's a beautiful dance and synergistic relationship that we have with these organisms.
So now drug companies are diving into microbiome research because science has found that certain bacteria may be blocking the effect of the drugs people are taking. We've also learned that our primary detox organ and nutrient generator is the microbiome, a huge finding that's changing the way we look at health. Promoting a healthy microbiome is a key factor in getting well. We're now seeing the importance of this vast community of life forms and how they interact. Here are some key takeaways from this section. The microbiome is a community of microbial life living in your body, the gut, skin, organs, and even the blood. Its foundation is established within the first 6 months of life. It communicates with the immune system and the nervous system. As we age, our immunity is less effective. The microbiome helps bolster our immune response and fight off disease. I'd like to take a quick moment here and ask that you share this series far and wide. Help me spread the word by telling everyone you know. You see, the drug companies with their huge budgets are able to jam the airwaves, selling pills that don't actually cure anything. We need to do things differently. What we're bringing you in this documentary series is a true breakthrough, a legitimate advance in science, all based on respect and appreciation of Mother Nature. It's going to turn the broken medical model on its head only if this information gets out there in a big way. So please take a moment to hit the buttons under this video and share this series far and wide. Help me get the message out there, and together we can bring hope to millions of people who are needlessly suffering. Thank you. So where does the microbiome come from? We need to understand this if we're going to trace back and fix something so important to us. Trace back how far? All the way back to our birth. In fact, how about the months before our birth? What bacteria were our parents exposed to? How did we come into this world? What happened after that? The answer to these questions are the beginning of what shaped your health today.
Things like vaginal birth or being breastfed have an impact on your microbiome potential for the rest of your life. But we also know that your diet within a very short period of time, days, can actually change its diversity. So what we know is that there's core species. There's some core species that are dictated by your parents as a host when you were born, and various things that primed it. And that gives you this core blueprint. So there's core blueprints between different siblings and different gene pools that we have.
If the baby is born through the birth canal, it gets the bacteria from the mom's vagina and swallows them, and that's how it seeds its own microbiome. That microbiome in a newborn baby, if the baby's born through the vagina, is the healthiest microbiome that a baby can have. If a baby's born by cesarean section, the microbiome is not as healthy. If the baby's given antibiotics, or the mom is given it, if the baby's given antibiotics either in labor, through the mom, or immediately after it's born, or if the mom gets antibiotics in labor, or if the mom has a C-section, the baby's born by C-section, that microbiome is going to be different, not as healthy.
You now take that infant and you now subtract out the microbiome from an antibiotic environment, born through C-section, never saw mom's vaginal canal, so born sterile, put on a hospital gurney, immediately inherits the hospital flora, not mom's flora. That kid is now going to get invasive strep infections in the ears and in the throat over the first year and a half of his life because that's its flora. And so it's going to get antibiotics from its pediatrician by the time it's 9 months old for its first ear infection, and it's going to get antibiotics every 2 to 3 months from there until they're 12 years old. And then they finally take out the tonsils that are now so riddled with chronic strep that they dysfunction. So they just removed the main immune system of the upper respiratory tree. So now they're going to be more prone to the viruses, the retroviruses, all of the infections there. That's the slippery slope we have our kids on right now.
Part of the answer may be in how their microbiome was primed in an early age. There was a recent study that also showed BPA exposure in the first 4 months of life can change the microbiome permanently. So we know that various chemical exposures can have an effect on ours as well. So it's this complex dance, you know. This is really important because how we start to manage newborns and how we start to manage mothers and the importance of breastfeeding and so many of the things that can't be made in formula that breast milks have, especially polysaccharides, really prime our microbiome. So these things should be standard of care in the future of medicine and in pediatrics.
When one is born through the vaginal canal and breastfed, because breast milk has bifidobacteria, it also has fructooligosaccharides, which also nourish prebiotics, which nourish the bacteria. So individuals who are born through the vaginal canal and breastfed develop a more full spectrum of microbes much earlier than individuals who are born through C-section. And the health benefits of the individuals born through the vaginal canal and breastfed have been shown to really impart protection against autoimmunity and allergic conditions. Within the first 6 months to 2 years is when we lay the foundation of the gut microbiome. And therefore, breastfeeding and the way we feed our children within the first 2 years is critical. After the first 2 years, then the gut microbiome is relatively stable. It has its foundation, and it will, let's say, it'll fluctuate with its environment, such that if you're taking antibiotics, then your microbiome will be less biodiversified. If you are hospitalized, if you have an injury, if you eat a lot of junk food, that will adversely affect the microbiome. So over a period of time, there is stability over teenage years, early adult years, but as we become older and our immune system becomes less effective, then the microbiome can start to become more, let's say, less diversified and can become more pathogenic. And that may lead to one of the key factors in the way we age, is the way our microbiome interacts with our body and the way our immune system does or does not interact well with our microbiome. There appears to be reciprocation, and that may play a role in longevity.
When baby is born by natural childbirth, baby is smothered in all the bacteria, but including Prevotella. Prevotella gets down into the gut and says, okay, baby, here's the code of the mammal that's about to feed you, mom. So here's the kind of food that's about to come down. So let's get your digestive system working and up and running in preparation for this food. And let's turn the genes on now. Time to close the tight junctions of intestinal permeability. You're not in mom's womb anymore. Now this first food coming, here's the code for it, so it's going to be okay for you. But we need to close your tight junctions. So when you have intestinal permeability, one of the things that helps so much is colostrum. The first 3 days of mother's breast milk is loaded with good bacteria, more messages going to baby, and some of that messaging is, let's heal the intestinal permeability. So bacteria from mom is directing baby's body development.
My experience with the babies, got two, both boys, 3 years apart, same household, I didn't change my diet, for better or worse. I didn't change my partner, thank goodness. Same parents. And both of them were born with C-section, one reason or another. Basically, there was one difference that I guess I could share, is that in my younger one, I was a little bit more up to speed with the times, and I was reading about all of this microbiome that the newborn might miss out on if they don't come out the regular way and they're born via C-section. So the slight difference, it's so trivial, it's like a non-procedure, where the baby's born, they take him out, C-section, and they just do like a little swab to introduce the baby, the newborn, to the microbiome.
And so one of the things that's talked about now is just swabbing, having the obstetrician go through the vagina, getting those vaginal secretions and rubbing them all over the face of the newborn baby that's born by cesarean section.
I thought, okay, as a mom, I'm open to this, I'll try it, okay? And I ran it by my doctor, and he's one of the progressive ones. He's amazing. He's just a wonderful, wonderful overall human being and a professional. He was like, absolutely, let's do this. Let's make sure we get everything ready. So the baby comes out, we swab him. I mean, so the nurses were not amused with that idea. In the OR, when they're like prepping me, they're like, you want to do what? I'm like, okay, it's a non-issue. Like, come on. And they're like, no, this is not our protocol. We don't even know about this. What is he talking about? We're going to wait till the doctor gets here. So then the doctor gets in and he's like, oh, come on, get up with the times. You know, you have to understand. Okay, she's a scientist. She does the genomics and the microbiome and metabolome and proteome. You know, you need to understand that. This is, what century we live in. He was so funny. It was hilarious. He did it in a very, very funny, friendly way. And so that's how, baby came out, got the microbiome, got the swab, and maybe, who knows, right? There's many factors. They did that with the younger one, did not do that with the older one. The older one had all kinds of GI issues right away, had horrible colic and acid reflux, and also developed allergies and still has some allergies. Some he outgrew, some he never did. Has intermittent asthma, and always struggled with gaining weight and all these things. The younger one didn't have any of those issues. So this is not like a hardcore scientifically backed type of a process. The one thing you do need to do is make sure that you get tested first, and now it's kind of routine before birth, that you don't have any pathogens or whatever, because you don't want to introduce your baby to something that's really not good for them. But for me, it didn't have to be all placebo-controlled double-blind clinical studies, and doesn't have to be like indisputable literature-backed support for personal decisions. So I made that personal decision. It didn't seem like a big deal to me at all, because had the baby been born the regular way, that's what they get. So that's okay.
When a mom breastfeeds, the microbiome is also different. But one of the things that the mom breastfeeds with, or that is part of breast milk, is actually a type of sugar that's very important for the baby, but it's something that the baby cannot digest. And so the teleological question, the big question is, why would a major component of breast milk be something that the baby is unable to digest? And the reason is because that's a food specifically for the bacteria in the newborn's digestive tract. So in the breast milk is actual food for specific bacteria in the baby's digestive tract, which is so important for the immune health of the baby. And I just love that.
So first trimester, just to kind of get what you're saying, it's mom's flora all the way through. What I've heard is sometime around the 8th month, there's a certain shift in a certain type of bacteria.
The vaginal microbiome changes in anticipation of the baby's trip through the birth canal. And that's one of the reasons that premature babies have problems, is because even if they are born through the vagina, they haven't gotten inoculated with that good bacteria that the third trimester hormonal changes would produce. So they come a little earlier, even though they're through the birth canal, they don't get that inoculation of the bacteria that are the end of pregnancy. So mom's microbiome is so critical for what happens during pregnancy. So you can prevent complications of pregnancy if mom has a healthy microbiome, and you have more complications of pregnancy if she doesn't have a healthy microbiome. So what's interesting, and because I started as an obstetrician gynecologist, then expanded into all different areas of functional medicine, is that what keeps people healthy in terms of cardiovascular health, emotional health, moods, etc., all of those concepts, all of those ways of looking at the body apply to women that are trying to get pregnant, trying to conceive, and apply during the pregnancy in order to give a healthy baby. But it's also more important than just that, because the health of the baby and the experience of the fetus in utero makes a difference in how the baby does as an adult. So you can impact adult health by a pregnancy experience. We call that developmental onset of adult disease, or fetal origin of adult disease. And so what we've found is that most of the common illnesses that are affecting our society today, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, can all be traced in the most upstream way to the fetal experience in utero.
I remember in medical school seeing all these signs in the clinic from La Leche about the importance of breastfeeding, and one sign in particular that said, breastfeed your baby to safeguard against Crohn's. And I remember as a third-year medical student looking at that and thinking, that's crazy. How can breastfeeding prevent Crohn's disease? Fast forward a couple decades, absolutely 100% breastfeeding does prevent against Crohn's disease, because these healthy substances in breast milk help to nourish and to feed the baby's burgeoning microbiome, and that healthy microbiome can protect that child from developing Crohn's disease down the road. Perhaps one of the most important points in your life, because that's going to determine what happens to your microbiome, how you're inoculated, et cetera, how you're colonized. So looking at a large scale practice like that in a country saying, we're going to try and encourage home births because A, it's cheaper, B, the mothers have better outcomes, C, the babies have better outcomes. That can change the whole future of generations of babies that are being born. Looking at guidelines and maybe saying we're not going to give women with group B strep antibiotics during labor or at birth when the babies are being born, because we know that the vast majority of these babies are not going to have any effects of the group B strep, but the vast majority of them who receive the antibiotics, it is going to affect the microbiome. So now that we're able to put the, sort of connect the dots and link these things together, we can really look at some of our basic medical practices and change the way we're doing things and dial things back a little bit or do things differently. And sometimes the way forward is the way back. Sometimes it's doing something in a way that seems sort of more low-tech, right, and more basic. I use just a hand spiralizer that costs $12 as opposed to a huge spiralizing machine that you plug in and so on, and it does a great job. So how can we do things in medicine that can protect our microbiome, that can lead to better outcomes, and that ironically are often cheaper?
I had a sweet baby boy 26 days ago, and I'm currently breastfeeding, so I'm on the clock. And it's been much more challenging than I anticipated. I thought I was just gonna breeze into breastfeeding and whip out my boob wherever and just breastfeed no problem. And it has been the single most painful, most challenging, emotionally draining thing I've ever done in my 39 years on this planet. And I am committed to continuing to do it for as long as I can, because I know how good it is both for me and for him, and ultimately for his microbiome. I'm able to feed all that bacteria with the breast milk that I wouldn't be able to do if we were exclusively doing formula. And that's no judgment to people that do formula. I'm actually supplementing with some formula now. And, I think fed is best ultimately, but I am committed to staying in this journey and enduring the pain and exploring my way through it, because I know that this is ultimately what nature designed. Right, that this breast milk is feeding only a portion of his human DNA and a huge portion of all of that microbial DNA. And I think that that is fascinating. I just learned that, and that was the thing that got me really excited about breastfeeding. When I was like, wait, what? And then also the breast milk changes depending on his developmental needs, and even depending on his cry will change what the breast milk produces. And so I'm simultaneously horrified by the pain of this process and in total wonder and awe in the perfection of what this symbiotic relationship is.
Giving a baby a healthy start is the ultimate goal. Our seed colony should come through mom, and her microbial health at the time of birth is really important. This is a result of her gut health and the bacteria she's exposed to in her diet, household, and overall environment. We now know that a healthy microbiome transfers downstream generationally. And as the science progresses, there'll be more emphasis on the foundational months of late pregnancy through the early infancy. Less antibiotic use and more exposure to healthy bacteria, the better it seems. Here are some key takeaways from this last section. The microbiome is critical to a healthy and safe pregnancy. The first microbiome exposure is through the vaginal canal, and we know that the Prevotella species signals to close tight junctions in gut lining, helping babies separate from mom and prepare for the outside world it just entered. Breast milk is full of healthy bacteria to help your baby with a healthy start. These include polysaccharides, fructooligosaccharides, and bifidobacteria. C-sections are sometimes life-saving, but are heavy on antibiotics and sterilizing rinses. Now we've learned that microbiome inoculation by swabbing can help transplant some of mom's healthy colonies to baby. How revolutionary is this new information? I traveled the country on a quest to find out and had the privilege of speaking with some of the greatest scientists and doctors in the field. I've made several films, traveled around the world, and nothing has held my attention quite like this. We are on the verge of an enormous breakthrough here. Here's what I found.
There is a paradigm-shifting study that came out in 2010 where they compared European children and African village children, their microbiomes. And they looked at them where the European children were eating the Western diet, and the African children from the small village, living the way their ancestors did, were eating lots of tubers, which are root vegetables, and basic foods. The microbiomes were completely different. The categories of what was dominant were completely different. And when you look at the European culture and what their diseases were, in the African culture, they didn't have any of those autoimmune diseases, that the microbiomes were completely different.
The reality is that we can learn from these people. We can recognize that the heart disease rates we think are normal in the modern United States and the modern world are completely optional. You know, it might be typical, but it's optional. And I want us to get that truth out there and to recognize that we've got hospitals that literally have McDonald's in them. You know, we've got doctors who are telling their patients what they eat doesn't matter. My own aunt went in for bladder cancer surgery this last year. We didn't know if she'd live. Not once did any of our oncologists ever mention the connection between food and health. And we know for a fact that, 90% of cancer cases are caused not by genetics, not by bad luck, but by lifestyle, environment, and food.
What we're finding is that the body is extraordinarily complex. What we used to think of as basic systems and the way things basically worked, the better our tools are to be able to monitor, read, understand, the more we're realizing the body is a very complex ecosystem, right? We're a collection of on the order of 100 billion cells, but we've got more bacterial, viral, fungal cells in our body than we do human cells. And those cells represent computer code. I think of the body as code and hardware, and a lot of the code is your 3.2 billion nucleotides that run your DNA, that are your DNA, that run who you are, how you are.
But if you think about the numbers, there's 10 times more of them and 150 times more genes that controls all function. For every message from the brain going down to the gut telling you what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up to the brain telling it what to do. It's the microbiome. So who's running the show? It's the microbiome that's running the show. So you want a friendly microbiome. If there's only one thing you do to be as healthy as possible, you build a friendly microbiome.
But there's a whole bunch of other code going on inside, on your skin, in your gut, in your flora, is code that determines your health, your blood chemistry makeup, your attitude, your neuroscience. So we are an extraordinary collection, and it's just now that we're beginning to understand the relationship between your gut flora, your microbiome, and disease, who you are, your personality, your attitudes even. I think this is just starting to become understandable with our ability to gather, process, and draw conclusions from big data given machine learning and AI capabilities.
The autistic children that we get to see, not just in my clinic, but around the world now, there are clinics that are starting to be able to reverse autism. And what you find out when you reverse an autistic child is these are our brightest angels. These kids are wired special. They have the most creative of minds. They have a grace about them that we generally lack socially because we've been taught different things and we learned programming to not trust. These kids have an inherent trust and seemingly are a lot closer to that realization of singularity. We're all human, we're all in this together. So I've seen again and again that these kids, once they start to recover and get supported by the microbiome and the health around them, they turn into these angels among us. That gives me hope again. I believe that the disease that we have on this planet has a silver lining to it. And as we start to support it in the right way, we got unwired through not just autism, but attention deficit and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Our brains have become unwired. That can be a good thing when you rewire. You now think differently. You now act differently because you just rewired a different circuitry. And that's my hope, is that we are going to get through the next 3 decades completely different species coming out the other side, because it can't be our species. Our species, it's going down fast, and it's taking a lot of species with it. But we can rewire, and we can re-heal, and we can rethink everything we do and generate something very positive on the long end of this.
The best disease from a business perspective is a chronic disease, because a person has it all their life. And if you manage the chronic disease but not reverse it, not address the root cause, you're going to have a patient for the rest of their life, and they're going to be using drugs to control their symptoms for the rest of their life. So from a business model, that's the ideal model, is a person with a disease that's going to last a long time. The disease isn't going to kill them. They're going to live for many years, and you have to manage it. So they're always going to come back to see you. And it is a great for business model. It's not great for, obviously, the person, the patient, to have to live with that, and your own conscience to live with that. And as a doctor, I think that we never went into medicine to just manage disease. We went into medicine to actually heal people and reverse that disease.
In Food 2.0, the central organizing principle is commerce, and it's driven by profits. And what we see is we have an economic system in which it's more profitable to give you processed junk full of added sugars and chemicals than it is to give you real wholesome food. It's actually cheaper per calorie to buy Twinkies with ingredients from all over the planet that are full of chemicals and junk than it is to buy a tomato from your local farmer. And this is crazy. And it's actually being subsidized by the taxpayer. In the United States, we have a commodities crop subsidy system in which we taxpayers provide tens of billions of dollars in subsidies to things like high fructose corn syrup, factory farmed animal products, processed junk, which tilts the marketplace and makes real healthy, wholesome foods effectively more expensive. So it's like you're being fined for wearing your seatbelt. Twinkies has 14 ingredients that are subsidized by taxpayers. Carrots have none. So when you get right down to it, I think we have to fight an uphill battle if we want to do the right thing for our bodies. That's why we've got this terrible tragedy that Whole Foods is equated with taking your whole paycheck.
In the last 50 years, we've been in a world where one size fits all. You have this diagnosis, you take this drug. And of course, that's fine when you have no other options. But we're now living in a world where it's not just a generic diagnosis, it's me. I can specifically know what are the 3.2 billion nucleotides in my genome. I can know exactly what my gut flora is. I can know how I process a particular drug or not. And we're heading towards a world of super hyper personalized medicine where I can actually give myself a particular drug, or you can think of even a microbiome infusion or modification, a particular microbe as a drug, and then understand how it impacts my life. I can measure my blood chemistries, I can measure my physiology, and that's a exciting future world for us. One where it's completely personalized and it's designed for me, and I can monitor how I'm doing minute to minute, day to day.
We have this amazing big data AI era which is starting to come in. Where do you see the kind of confluence of big data with like clinicians and how healthcare will be modified with these advances?
We live in a world of to a large degree evidence-based medicine or fact-based medicine. In other words, clinicians and researchers need to see the data and they need to see properly constructed experiments to say, okay, this particular gut flora is indicative of this autoimmune disease or is indicative of this neurodegenerative disease, and seeing it in enough people. And so for the first time, we're actually getting enough of a population of individuals that we can start to reach conclusions. And then we're also beginning to understand how we can manipulate the microbiome and see if we make that change, does it cause a solution or does it make the problem worse? So I think it's really right here, right now, over the next 5 to 10 years that we're gathering the data and doing the science and reaching the conclusions to determine what's the next generation of truth in the medical arena.
Because we now realize that pancreatic cancer actually comes from the gut microbiome, actually coming from leaky gut, moving into pancreas, shutting down the immune system. And there was a research that was published specifically about how pancreatic cancer is caused by the gut microbiome. Mayo Clinic published a research on the breast cancer being caused by microbiome. And we just had a research 2 weeks ago on liver cancer being caused by gut microbiome. And you start to think about all of these chronic diseases. Their science is clearly showing where the things are coming from. And every drug company is resisting because they cannot make money from this. This has to stop.
To find out that the microbial life can intelligently figure out the difference between a cancer cell and a human cell and induce the opposite response with their mitochondria, you start to realize we're barely human. To be human and alive means you have 20, 30, 40,000 species of bacteria, 5 million species of fungi, 300,000 species of parasites, speaking to the mitochondria within your cells to coordinate constant repair, constant transformation, regeneration, repair, make you stronger, not weaker. And so the extraordinary message to the future of science and medicine is if we keep killing the smallest things among us, we will die. If we start to support the fundamentals of life and we start to take care of the mitochondria and take care of the microbiome, they will in concert build the most resilient healing machines ever on the planet, and we will heal from the mercury toxicity, the aluminum toxicity, you name all the pharmaceutical toxicity, chemical farming, you name the disaster, we will be healing machines as never seen before.
And you will realize soon enough that chronic diseases are caused by chronic inflammation. And the chronic inflammation is caused by the imbalance of the gut microbiome. And that's really where the key is, understanding what's happening in the gut. And most people have completely ignored that in the Western medicine, right?
Inflammation is a response pattern in the simplest terms. It causes redness, it causes swelling, it causes pain, and it causes heat. When you look back in medical literature, it's probably the first medical type health phenomena that was ever described in medical literature. It goes back to ancient Egyptian writings thousands of years ago. So doctors have known that this is a built-in process. Now, there's different ways to elicit inflammation. You can get it from a cut, or an insect bite, or you can get it from eating an Oreo cookie. Or if a person's allergic, they breathe in pollen and they start wheezing. Maybe they have an asthma reaction. Or if a person is exposed to radiation. We know that astronauts have a huge issue with this. And where is it showing up in the astronauts that live in the space station? In their eyes. It's causing chronic eye damage. So this inflammatory process, again, can go in many different directions, but it's still basically the same kind of response pattern that our immune cells and related cells have to some kind of noxious stimulus.
When you talk about things like leaky gut, people think that's a voodoo term, right? Here's very interesting that people don't know that there are more foreign cells in human body than the cells that we get from our mom and dad. Our DNA produces only 20,000 genes, and our microbes in our gut produce somewhere between 2 million to 20 million genes. Think about it for a second. That means we are less than 1% human. And that is just the beginning of us becoming an ecosystem and connected within ourselves and connected to the nature and environment outside us. And there is anything that happens outside in the environment affects us. And what happens inside us, which is impacted by the food we eat, really changes who we are. And that's why I would believe that once we understand the connectedness of the human body and the ecosystem that is humans as a walking, talking ecosystem, living in this larger ecosystem we call universe, everything changes.
Functional medicine is a new way of delivering care that's designed for the types of diseases that we see today. So instead of trying to find the symptom and just give a pill for it, you try to find the root cause. Instead of the patient just doing what the doctor says, the patient has to participate in the care. And instead of looking at where the disease manifests in the body, we start to look at the whole picture. And there's many different ways that it's been called over the last few years, but I believe that functional medicine is a meme that is starting to infiltrate the rest of society, and I think it's the future of healthcare.
Most likely, one of the key elements is to really follow patients from the very beginning, ideally from birth until they develop the problem, so that we can follow the journey that they take to go from genetic predisposition to disease. And at the same token, you can see the changes during the time of the microbiome composition and function, so you can interrogate yourself and say, okay, this is what happened a few months before that they developed disease, that the microbiome switched from this composition, this other composition, its function went from here to there, this specific metabolic pathway were activated. And these are all predictors that down the road, on that specific genetic background, these people that will develop disease. That's what is necessary.
We've had a recent advance, we've had some major advances in the field of science. One was the Human Genome Project. And the Human Genome Project allowed us to understand our genes, and we realized that the environment has a major influence on our genes, what they call an epigenetic effect. The next major breakthrough that has happened has been the Human Microbiome Project, which has now really shown how diverse each of our gut bacteria species are, and then how that impacts chronic disease. So the gut microbiome produces bacteria, and these bacteria all have enzymes and different functions. So the gut microbiome is involved with making micronutrients, the gut microbiome is involved with synthesizing hormones, the gut microbiome is involved with making hormones active, the gut microbiome is involved with detoxifying us and getting rid of chemicals through our body. The gut microbiome produces lipopolysaccharides and things that impact our immune system and modulate our immune function. And it also creates neuropeptides that modulate our mood. So every aspect of a human biochemistry book takes place in the gut microbiome.
If you look at these epidemics of autoimmune diseases, so we create, a situation in which now you increase fast this autoimmune process in terms of the impact on the human population in a very short period of time. So in other words, we're doing something wrong to increase the number of people that come down without immunity. But if you want to see the same glass half full, that means that if we understand what we did wrong, we can stop these epidemics. And doing that, that means that, autoimmunity is not a destiny. As a matter of fact, the recipe for chronic inflammatory diseases, including autoimmune diseases, is much more complex than we predicted before. Now, what is left is the microbiome. And the microbiome can be really modulated in a way that can protect us rather than, harm us. There are some other aspects that we can control. Lifestyle definitely is part of the environment, and definitely that's under our control. One most important, I believe, aspect is, that impinge on microbiome, composition and function is, the way that we eat. Again, we're born only once. We may have infections here and there, sporadic use of antibiotics, but we eat 3-4 times a day. And that's the most impactful way that we can change the microbiome composition.
The microbiome is the next frontier in medicine. Understanding it and optimizing it are going to be critical to solving so many of our healthcare issues. People don't think that their gut flora relates to obesity or type 2 diabetes, but it does. You can literally transplant fecal matter from a thin person to a diabetic person and reverse their diabetes. You can take fecal matter from a normal kid and put an autistic kid and their behavior changes. These are the kinds of things we're seeing. So this is critical to the future of understanding chronic disease, and understanding what to do about it is key. Now, most physicians aren't trained in it. They don't know how to assess the microbiome or the gut. They don't know how to normalize its function. It's an enormous gap in education and practice.
In the past, we left the microbiome outside the lab and we're looking at cells in isolation. Now we understand that the complex web of life carries an elaborate communication system that we can barely grasp. It's amazing and genius, and it's been right under our noses this whole time. Let's recap some of what we've learned here. Inflammation is a response pattern, and in the simplest terms, here's what it causes: redness, swelling, pain, and heat. When you look back at the medical literature, it's probably the first medical type health phenomenon that was ever described. It goes back to ancient Egyptian writings thousands of years ago. So doctors have known about this built-in process for healing and self-defense. Our microbiome harbors thousands of species of bacteria, fungi, and even parasites. We know that these organisms are speaking to the mitochondria within your cells to coordinate growth, energy output, and constant repair. We've learned that 90% of our health is determined by social, behavioral, and environmental factors, and only 10% of our health is determined by medical interventions. Yet this is where all the money is spent, and results are dismal for chronic disease. The Human Genome Project allowed us to understand our genes, and we realized that environment has a major influence in our genes, what they call the epigenetic effect. Now, the next major breakthrough that's happened has been the Human Microbiome Project, where we're racing to understand what the genes in the trillions of microbes code for. Everything from immunity, enzyme production, antibiotics, and more. There's a treasure trove of information and genetic material in this life soup that can help us. Okay, time out. I just want to give you a quick reminder to share this series with your friends, family, and loved ones. Do it now and help me get the word out. This 9-day free screening is an exclusive event. You and your friends and family can watch it completely free for the next 9 days, and then it's taken offline. This is your chance right now to share Interconnected with the people you know who need to hear this information. It can be your gift to them, as it's likely their doctors don't even know this yet, and it's completely free for a limited time. Thank you. As you can see, there are a lot of reasons for all the excitement in this field. Doctors are helping people overcome years of suffering with interventions in the microbiome. In the episodes to come, you're going to learn about how to heal your gut and bring down inflammation. You're going to learn about the proper use of probiotics and how all of this affects our brains and those of our children. We'll take deep dives into chronic diseases like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, thyroid issues, obesity, and more. But most important, we're going to get into powerful solutions that can turn your health around. We dig up specific diets, supplements, recipes, and solutions for these ailments and share actionable advice in each episode. The goal is to empower you so you could take your health back into your own hands. What I've seen on this journey has been miraculous, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you during this 9-day screening of Interconnected. Each day, you'll have access to another episode of the series filled with wisdom and actionable ideas you can apply in your life right now. This information is not on TV and very slow to get to your doctor's desk. That's why it's critical that you share this series with your friends and family right now. Please use the buttons under the video here. Share this far and wide. This is an exclusive event that will end in 9 days, so please make room in your life to enjoy these episodes. You'll learn a great deal that can save your life. I'm Dr. Pedram Shojai, and I'm excited to be hosting this journey with you. I will see you in the next episode.